Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunvaditam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In the Srimad Bhagvatam, we are, thank you, privy to the various leelas of Krishna in Vrindavan. And we know from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that he wanted people in the world to know about his pastimes in Vrindavan. From the beginning of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswāmī, the authorized person writing about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, says, Anarpita charim chirat karana yavatīrna kalau samarpayitumunu tojvala rasam shriyam. That Uddhava rasa, the topmost of rasa, the madhura ras, which is unknown in the world. And Kaviraj Goswāmī says, Anarpita charim chirat. Some say, for a long time, the translation says. Fakir Mohan, the one Madhavananda Prabhu was talking about the other day, said, this means forever. It's never been taught. There's a way in which Krishna wants people of the world to know what his loving associates are like here in the spiritual world and what his relationship is with them. Because as Kaviraj Goswāmī says, he's not so interested in the kind of worship that takes place in Vaikuntha with great awe and reverence, and mentions that when Krishna's associates, and very particularly he's talking about the Madhurya Ras, where I tread very carefully and speak what's there in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishna has lovers, and it's a very intense kind of love in which there are arguments and there are lovers' quarrels. Everything we see in the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. Urvam dashakam ashvatam prahar avyayam chandansi yasya parnani yasyam veda savedavid adashchorvam prashritas tasya shaka guna pravida vishaya pravala adashchamulan anasantatani karmani bandini manusha loke. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, hey, in the material world you can see a reflection of the spiritual world. And we heard that in the invocation verse that we sang, yuvatīnāṁ yathā yūni yūnāṁ chau yuvatau yathā mano bhiramate tadvad mano me ramatāṁ tvayi. That's a verse in the Padyāvalī Rūpa Gosvāmī wrote, giving this idea of the reflection. He says, in this world we see how boys and girls are naturally attracted to one another. It's the main power of the material world, this attraction. No one needs to be trained in it. It just is automatically, one is attracted to the other, and vice versa. And there's a way in which he says then, now let me be that attracted to you. And he continues that metaphor in the Padyāvalī saying, just as a lover who's waiting for a letter. Of course, now it's a text, maybe. But in those days, it was a letter. And he describes how when the letter finally arrives, after multiple times checking the mailbox every day, and oh, maybe it's tomorrow. And finally it comes, and that recipient's hands are shaking, he says. What will she say? And then opens, and there's completely consuming, a consuming experience that person has in reading the letter, every word. Oh, what did this mean? Wait a minute, why is the comma here and not there? He said, let me read Srimad Bhagvatam like this. Let that be my experience. Because ultimately, the Srimad Bhagvatam is a love letter from the spiritual world. In fact, there are several letters we find. Rukmini's letter to Krishna saying, how does that verse start? She says, yathā. I'll find it. Yeah. She writes and says, if Krishna, marry me. If you don't marry me, then I'll just perform severe austerities until this body withers, and then I'll do it again in the next lives. I'll just perform severe austerities until you accept me. And then we have the letters that Krishna sends to his parents and the Gopis in Vrindavan, explaining why he didn't come back right away. Because when he left Vrindavan, he told them that, I'll be right back. So the Srimad Bhagavatam takes us right to the reality. In fact, it begins by saying that this is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. So what is that reality? It's the loving exchanges that the devotees have with Krishna in the spiritual world. So we come to Vrindavan to feel that, to remember the personalities, specific personalities who are in Krishna's entourage and who are his loving servants and who have deep relationships with him. And in this place, Chitrasakhi, it's one of the Ashtasakis who we see in Mayapur, Radha Madhav. The Sakhis, again with bowed head and speaking from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, are described as architects of Krishna's rasa. They are generally the same age as Srimati Radharani and have their servants. They serve her relationship with Krishna, but they have their own independence. They have independent relationships with Krishna as well. And they're perfectly capable of arguing with Krishna or telling him, as is described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when he comes to see Srimati Radharani, he doesn't want to talk to you. And there are other servants of Krishna who are intimates, and there are many categories, of course, also called manjaris. We know that we're followers of Rupa Manjari. We're called Rupanugas. The manjaris are more submissive, younger than Srimati Radharani, and also they are like her heart cells in a way. We have this understanding in science now that there are more neurons in the heart than there are in the brain. That's why when we talk about feeling something, it's like, I knew it in my heart. And they serve Srimati Radharani without any sense of independence at all, only service for her pleasure in serving Krishna. Of course, that's also there in the Sakis, but they have a slightly different mood of independence and having their own category of service, as is described of Chitra Saki. Chitra indicates artistic talent, and it's described in some of the Vaishnava literatures about how she serves Srimati Radharani by helping to decorate her. She has other services as well. But this is the ideas of Sakis. Each one of these villages where the Sakis reside are spiritual power centers where their presiding Saki has a particular set of services to enhance Krishna's relationship with Srimati Radharani. And that's how they serve. Our Gaudiya Vaishnavas have also given descriptions of gopis in general. All of these categories that I'm talking about, Sakis, Manjaris, and so forth, they're all considered gopis. Means those who are of the cowherd village, the women there. And some of them are Nitya Siddhas, and that have always been engaged in Krishna service. Some are called Sadhana Siddhas, and we know from Srimad Bhagvatam that the prayers personified Vedas chapter 87 in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagvatam describes how the Vedas are personified. They come and wake up the Lord and sing to him. And who would know the Vedas better than the personified Vedas? I mean, literally, they're the personified Vedas. So one of the indications there is that the ultimate goal of all the Vedas is to come to realization of the topmost loving sentiments one can have for Krishna. And in that context, it's described by our acharyas how some of the personified Vedas also pine for residence in Vrindavan and request Krishna for it and attain that. We know also from Srimad Bhagavatam that the sages at Dandakaranya, who when they saw Sri Ramachandra had been overwhelmed with a sense of attraction. And not just attraction from him as a warrior or because he's all attractive, but in a very specific way. They thought of him with kind of sense of, they wanted to be with him conjugally. And Ramachandra had accepted their prayer, but said, you'll have to wait. And when Krishna came for his Leela here, he brought those sages who had followed in the footsteps of the Gopis of Vrindavan after seeing Ramachandra having those emotions and then wanting to follow him. Krishna had specifically fulfilled their desires to take birth as Gopis in his Leela, here to enter into the rasa dance. Someone gave me a chart once. There's several categories. You can see the sadhana siddhas, the nitya siddhas, and different categories wherever they've come from. In general, there are, as Bhagavatam describes, various emotions that we have as living beings. And in the 7th canto, 1st chapter, it's described how Krishna can accommodate those. Kama dvesha bhaya sneha yathā bhakteshvare manaha. I'll need help with the third line. Avesha tam gata hitva bhavasto gatim gata. that there are many people who have attained Krishna because of various emotions. Kama, dvesha, bhaya, snedha, yathā bhakteshvare manaha means that some people, they have this lust. In fact, you'll find in the Nectar of Instruction, those who are in Madhurya Ras, the Gopis, called Kamanuga, or those who aspire for that. They're following this intense mood of what's called kama, or is described as lust. But interestingly, it's the opposite of the lust we have in the material world. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswami makes a specific point about that. And he said, that, like two metals. One is gold, and that's the love that, or the so-called lust of the Gopis for Krishna. And then there's iron, which is the lust of the material world. You say, well, they're the same. In the sense they're both metals, but one's gold and one's iron. And so he describes Krishnendriya Priti, or love for wanting to please Krishna's senses. This is a kind of described as lust. That they see him in, this is the ontology of Gaudiya Vaishnavism that's foundational, that Shukadeva Goswami talks about in the 14th chapter of the 10th canto. He says, Atmanam Akilatmanam. That Krishna is the soul of our soul. And he points out that we're very adept and enthusiastic for taking care of our bodies. Because we think we are our body. But why do we think we're our body? Is because we're in it. We're the soul within the body. The Atma is in the body. Once we're out of the body, we really don't care about it. You can leave it in the street. I don't know about those dogs. They sleep in the street all the time. They're like, you don't care if you get run over. You just have some trust. But as soon as we leave our body, it's not a concern to us anymore. We just leave it behind. And it gets thrown somewhere, or burned, or eaten. But as long as we're in it and we misidentify, we're very eager to take care of the body. Every hair has to be in place. A little back here. And so Shukadeva Goswami says, yeah, that's because you love the soul. And then he says, why do you love the soul so much? Atmanam Akilatmanam. Because the soul comes from Krishna. And he says, now imagine how much you love your body and how much you love your actual self, your real self, your Atma. But then imagine how much you'd love the soul of your soul. And so he says, Krishna is Atmanam Akilatmanam. He's the soul of all souls. So this is Krishna consciousness, that Krishnendriya Priti. When we come to understand that to use the way Krishna speaks in the Bhagavad Gita, I'm part and parcel of Krishna. I'm his. And when we know that, as Prabhupada would give these simple examples, the hand, when it knows it's to feed the mouth, to feed the stomach, and then it enjoys by cooperation. And then it's happy and engaged, happily engaged. But if the hand tries to enjoy independently, it's in a diseased condition. So coming to Krishna consciousness means to understand that Krishna is the soul of my soul. Prahlad Maharaj mentions in his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev that that understanding, that when I give myself to Krishna, then I become the benefactor of that, because I'm part of Krishna. He gives this example that if you look in the mirror and decorate your face, did anybody do that today? We'll come around, check your Tilak, see if you did it in the dark. Then you'll see that the image in the mirror is decorated as well. You decorated your face, and then there's a mirror image of you right there. And it's also decorated. So he said, so when we please Krishna, then we naturally become pleased. When we decorate Krishna, then we become decorated. One who has flipped this switch or has a clear idea about this, then is as enthusiastic to serve Krishna senses as they ever were for serving their own senses. And a devotee sings about this. Kamadinam katina katida balita durnideshas tesham jata magina karuna natrapa nopashanti utsritaitanata yarupate samprata labda buddhis tamayata sharanam abhayamam yungshva madasye. He laments, he says, how long have I served my senses? And you know what they are, he says? Bad masters. They never did anything for me, my senses. I served them relentlessly and without questioning, and they never gave me time off, that's one thing. They never gave me mercy, and they didn't even thank me, ever. They just wanted more. The bad masters. Then he says, Utsrijaitanata yarupate samprata labda buddhis. Labda buddhi, now I've gained my intelligence. I've understood. I've flipped the switch. I can understand. I've been looking at the illusion and not the reality. And now I understand what reality is. It means pleasing Krishna's senses. And by the more I please Krishna's senses, the more I become satisfied and happy naturally. And the devotee then apparently becomes engaged in selfless service, but actually serving the real self. And then by doing that, we're incidentally or co-concomitantly, if that's a word, served by serving Krishna. So we find in Vrindavan the pinnacle of those moods. To reveal that to the world, which is where I began, Krishna wanted I needed that. Krishna sent Uddhava to Vrindavan. And I hope nobody snapped a picture. They'll think I've become a sahaja. He sent Uddhava to Vrindavan because he had been away from Vrindavan for longer than anybody thought he ever would. And there, the residents were pining for him. In fact, it's mentioned that in Vrindavan, the Gopis were constantly crying, so they never slept. When your face is covered with tears, you can't sleep. And there was a drying up of the households there that were normally full of music, natural music, which is described, the natural music of Vrindavan. Kuchat ko kilaham sasara sagana. You know, in Srinivasacharya is talking about Vrindavan, about the cuckoos and the peacocks. Some of them were just there, almost perfectly on cue. And just the beauty of Vrindavan, the absorption and the sound vibration there. But the real enhancement is described how all the natural ways that the devotees were preparing to serve Krishna for the day. For instance, they're churning butter. And while churning, their bangles are moving in a rhythmic way. And then they'll sing songs about Krishna, remembering his pastimes from the previous days or weeks. And they're in harmony with that. So this is where music comes from the spiritual world. In fact, it's described how every gopi has her own individual raga that defines her specific relationship and love for Krishna. And then in connection with that, interestingly, for those who have the sentiment, as apparently one philosopher had once, now it's a bumper sticker, that without music, life doesn't make sense. I'd say his name, but it'll probably profane the assembly. And there's a verse from one of the Puranas that says actually every species of life has its own raga. And we know, Sriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpa Taravo Durma Mishchintamani Ganamai Toyamamritam Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Api Vamshi Priyasaki Chiranandam Jyoti Paramapi Tarasvadyam Apicha Sayatra Shiradi Sravati Surabhibyasha Sumahan Nimesardhyakyo Vavratitina Trapi Samayaha Vaje Shweta Dvipam Tamahamiha Golokamitiyam Vinantaste Shantakshiti Viralachara Katipaye. This is a description, the revelation of Lord Brahma. When he sees the spiritual world, Krishna reveals it to him because of his sincerity. And his, by the way, his performing of tapasya, which was tapastam tapayetena tavasidhir bhavishyati. Saraswati gave him a mantra and said, do tapasya by chanting this mantra and everything will be revealed to you. So he saw the spiritual world, and there was the music of the spiritual world dancing. And the flute song he also heard. Atavenu nadadasya tvayi muti mayigati spuranti praviveshasu mukabjani swayambhujaha. This is how he heard the flute of Sri Krishna, and it entered into his 8 ear holes. We have a small Brahma in this universe, only 4 heads, 8 ears. And from that came the Kama Gayatri. All enlightenment comes from the sound of the spiritual world. And so, when Uddhava entered Vrindavan, he was sent by Krishna. Krishna had a specific desire to send him here, even more than to assuage the sense of separation of the Gopis of Vrindavan. He wanted his best servant, most intimate devotee, Uddhava. Haridasya Varyo, 3 Haridasya Varyos, Yudhishthir, Uddhava, and Govardhan. They're all mentioned as Haridasya Varyo. He wanted Uddhava to see, in the same vein that Lord Chaitanya came, he said, I want everybody to know about this. He wanted Uddhava to know about what it's like in Vrindavan. Because, you know, when you have some service and you become aware of the fact that, maybe I'm doing the best of all service. And then you see somebody sends you, here, walk in here, and you hear somebody else speaking, and you go like, I don't know anything. That's what happened to Uddhava. And that's what Krishna wanted. He sent him here to Vrindavan, and he wanted him to come and see for himself the mood of the gopis. He knew he was so intelligent, so devotional, that he would be able to imbibe that from the gopis of Vrindavan. So Uddhava came here, and it's described in the Srimad Bhagvatam how when he entered, he could hear the music of Vrindavan. There were cows and the bulls in rut, and they were chasing after the most fertile cows, and everywhere there were the calves, and the beauty of Vrindavan, it was verdant. And then you might say, well, Vaisesika Dasa, you just said that during the time that Krishna was absent, everything was dried up. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, it was, but Krishna reawoke those parts of Vrindavan as he came in, just so Uddhava could see what it normally looks like in Vrindavan. And when he came into Vrindavan, he first went to the house of Nanda and Yashoda. He was riding on a golden chariot, and he met with Nanda, Yashoda, and they fed him, and they talked, and they asked questions about Krishna. And the next morning when the sun came up, the gopis could see a golden chariot parked outside of Nanda Yashoda's house. And they immediately had some severe words. They said, well, what is this, a Krura coming back? He said, he already took away our life, because as you know, Akrura came on a brand new chariot by Krishna's arrangement, because Krishna had to ride on it, so Kamsa gave him a brand new chariot, because Krishna was going to ride in something that Kamsa drove. But when his devotee Akrura drove it, he would sit in that. And they said, so now what can he take, Akrura, if he's come back? They were speculating that it was Akrura. They said, maybe he wants our flesh. He can cut off pounds of our flesh and take that away now. But it doesn't matter. We don't even care because he already killed us by taking away Krishna. So when they saw that it was Uddhava who had come, they surrounded him as described there rather shamelessly. There was no sense of etiquette that here a great personality has arrived. Of course, he was a great personality. He's Krishna's cousin brother. He looks just like Krishna. There's no difference. And they were enamored of him for sure, but because in anticipation that maybe this is from Krishna, they crowded around him, they crowded him, and began to ask many, many questions. And that time, one of the gopis, as is described in the Srimad Bhagvatam, Shukadeva is very delicate in describing Srimati Radharani. In fact, he doesn't mention her by name, but he'll say the best of all of them, and there are indications throughout the Bhagavatam, Parokshavad, indirectly describing Srimati Radharani, and there is one of the most important parts of the Srimad Bhagavatam regarding the revelation of what is the mood of Vrindavan, what is this service there, in that there's great detail in the commentary describing how Srimati Radharani then, in the presence of Uddhava and all others, becomes oblivious to both him and the others, and then engages in a conversation with a bumblebee. And she first says, noticing the bumblebee as they dart around to different places, has touched her feet. He said, don't touch me. I see there's kumkum on your whiskers, and I know where that comes from. That comes from the breasts of Krishna's other lovers in Mathura. And these city women, I know that you're there, that he's there associating with them. And he begins to criticize, she begins to criticize Krishna, saying that we've heard from Purnamasi about you. Purnamasi is the one Yogamaya who's arranging many of the pastimes for Krishna in Vrindavan, and also informing both the residents in Vrindavan and later in Dwarka. Everyone wants to talk to Purnamasi to find out what was Krishna's life like back there. Who were these gopis? And they all find out when they come to Kurukshetra for that eclipse of the sun. And there she starts to talk about all the ways in which Krishna is a great cheater. For instance, when he was in the incarnation of Ramachandra, she said, you killed Bali from behind a tree like a hunter does. You should have faced him like a warrior, but you stood behind a tree and killed us. That kind of character is that. And as Urukrama, as Vamandev, you stole everything from Bali, even though he offered you charity, and you just took everything and tied him up and left him like that. So what do you expect? And as she's talking in ways of critical Krishna, then she realizes the bee's gone, and she thinks, he might have gone back and told Krishna everything that I just said. And then she becomes frantic. And finally, when the bee comes back, she starts to apologize. Now, all of these ways of speaking are analyzed by our acharyas and categorized in the moods of rasa. It may sound, that sounds a little pedantic for talking about rasa, but that's what the the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. That's why most people, you ask, did you read the Nectar of Devotion? He said, yeah, half. And what happened to the other half? Like, I couldn't get through it. Unless you actually, I mean, it is tedious in a way, unless you really have it's building a framework for something much bigger. And interesting how something spontaneous then fits into these categories and patterns. But it's just like my parents used to tell me when I was a kid. There was this comedian called Jack Benny, who none of you have ever heard of, I'm sure. But he would get up on stage and he would tell jokes and play his violin. And he was apparently a terrible violin player. But my parents told me, you don't get the joke because you're a kid, but let me explain it to you. He's a consummate violinist. And then they told me something that I had to think about for many years. And that is, in order to be a terrible violinist, first you have to be a consummate one. And then you can pretend to be a terrible one. Because if you're terrible, you just sound terrible. But there's something about the way he was able to expertly manipulate it and then make it being terrible sound funny. What I'm getting at is that behind the framework of the spontaneity and the spiritual, there is a framework behind the spontaneity in the spiritual world, just as there are patterns of notes. Your teacher will tell you, every good boy does fine, or whatever, however you learn to read music and you see the patterns, but later on, then it becomes completely spontaneous. So our Goswamis have given this framework to understand how this spontaneous love of the spiritual world, what's the music you can read behind it. Then it all unfolds in the pastimes in Vrindavan. And as I was saying, the previous acharyas, specifically Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, explains the different patterns of speech that Srimati Radharani is engaging in speaking about the bee, chastising Krishna and so forth, and they come under different labels like prajalpa and vijalpa and pratijalpa, and talking crazily about Krishna in different ways out of a madness of love. And that's the point, that Krishna sent Uddhava there to see the madness of the devotees. Now, what was his conclusion? Take the verse now that we were looking for. This is an important verse, Uddhava's conclusion, and the reason I bring it up is, so what do we do when we're here? What should we take away when we come to the village of Asaki? First is this mood of understanding that there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the material world, everyone gets used to cooperating in sublimating the idea of the personality of Godhead. In various philosophies and in various ways, everyone becomes a functioning atheist, just like there are functioning alcoholics. And in one way or another, people become atheistic and learn how to sublimate the idea of there being a Supreme Personality of Godhead. Well, the Srimad Bhagavatam's come to liberate everybody from that by revealing the personality of God, and Prabhupada was the most eager of anyone to reveal it to the world. Why do you think he summarized the Krishna book? And he not only gave a summarized the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagvatam, because that's a specific part that Narada Muni, as those of us who were just in Jagannath Puri, were reading the 5th chapter of the 1st canto of the Bhagavatam, Narada Muni came and said to Vyasadeva, you blew it, because people are so inclined to dismiss God or sublimate the idea of there being a personality of God and just at most pray to the universe or do some ritual for their own material benefit. So you have to talk about him directly and reveal the spiritual world. Anarto pasanam sakshat bhakti yoga madhoksaje lokasya ajanato vidvams chakre satvata samhitam. And therefore, Srila Vyasadeva took his advice and wrote about Uddhava coming to Vrindavan and the pastimes of Krishna here. And Prabhupada also had it illustrated. And I don't know about you, but the first time I saw the Krishna book, I was mesmerized. I kept looking at the pictures over and over again. it didn't matter how many times I looked at him, I'd be amazed that somebody was, first of all, coming out and saying God was a person. I mean, who does that? Nobody I'd ever heard. Certainly not my parents. And even the Christians, friends I had, would talk about Jesus, and it was like, yeah, well, who is he? It's like, Son of God. It's like, who's God? It's like, well, he's kind of the Son of God and God at the same time, but we don't really know, and we're not going to talk about it. And that's pretty much the word on the street anywhere in the world. Is, what's his name? It's like, can't say his name. What does he look like? Don't ask me, because... And there's a little tract that Christians used to give out. I'm not Christian bashing, by the way. I love Christians, they're brethren, but they gave out a tract. They used to give them to us when we were distributing books. And we'd keep them, because the next time someone came along and said, have you heard of Jesus Christ? I said, yeah, have you? And we'd give it right back. But on the cover, the most famous Christian tract was a little booklet about that big, and it had a picture of a throne. And on the throne there was a light, and that was it. And that's why we get to the Upanishads. Hiranmayena patrena satyasa pihitamukam tatvam pushana pavrenu satyadharma. Show me your face. I want to know God personally. So this is an outrageous announcement to the world that God's a person. He has his own life. He has his own friends. He has his own family. And it's like, how could that be? Only I have a family. Only I have friends. Why does God have friends? Because there's a sense like, if he's got a family, then what's mine all about? How do I fit in? It's all due to the sense of false ego that I'm separate from Krishna. We're actually joyfully a part of his family. So Prabhupada announced that to the world. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu announced it to the world. Anarpita Charim Charat. This hasn't been broadcast before. Let's tell everybody. And then Krishna sent Uddhava to Vrindavan and said, he didn't tell him. He knew he'd find out for himself and come back. And this is the verse among several that he wrote. It is important for us to sing, to remember the mood. It's on page 236 at the top. And it's from 10th canto, 47th chapter, 61st verse. And it goes like this. Asambaho charadarena jushambaham syam Vrindavane kimapi gulmalatoshadinam Yadusyajam swajanam aryapatam shahitva Bejur bakunda padavim shrutibir vimrigyam. One more time. Asam maho charanarenu jusham mahamsyam Vrindavane kimapi gulmalatoshadinam Yadusyajam swajandam aryapatam chahitva Bejur makunda padavim shrutibir vimringa. Una más, por favor. Asambaho charanarenu jusham mahamsyam Vrindavane kimapi gulmalatoshadinam Yadusyajam swajanam aryapatam shahitva Bejur makunda padavim shrutibir vimringyam. The Gopis of Vrindavan have given up the association of their husbands, sons, and other family members, who are very difficult to give up, and they have forsaken the path of chastity to take shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda Krishna, which one should search for by Vedic knowledge. Oh, let me be fortunate enough to be one of the bushes, creepers, or herbs in Vrindavan, because the gopis trample them and bless them with the dust of their lotus feet. So there's a way in which, when one comes to feel the I was going to say greatness, but it's a word we talk about when we're talking about the opulence of the Lord, the sweetness of Vrindavan, the overwhelming sweetness of Vrindavan. Natural humility should grow within the heart. In the Bhagavatamrita, Narada talks about dainya. Dainya means utter humility. Nothing that I want to take, I only want to give back, because I'm so overwhelmed by what I'm receiving from Krishna, from the Dham, that I just feel unlimitedly grateful and want to serve with no remuneration at all. The service itself is its own remuneration. And this dainya, he says, it always accompanies the advancement of bhakti. So one can tell, he said, that as you're advancing on the path of bhakti, there'll be a proportionate awakening of dainya, or utter humility, within your heart. And such a mood will also create this kind of hunger for hearing more and more about Krishna. We want to know every detail. In fact, Sanatana Goswami, when speaking about the Bhagvatam in his opening prayers to the Bhagvatam, says, every word, every syllable is a shower of nectar in the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the revelation of those who are entering deeply within the process of bhakti. So, in this verse, he speaks about, he mentions the word chastity, and that reminded me of something from the chapter. They have forsaken the path of chastity. It's interesting in the context because the culture is very aware of chastity as the Sri Dharma. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives this analysis of chastity. He says, well, there's the woman who's married and then she cheats on her husband. This is the worst, because then she's cheating both the lover and the husband. And said there's one that leaves the husband and stays with the lover. And that, oh, that's better, because at least it's dedicated to one person. Then the third, he says, is the woman who leaves everyone, family, the husband, and goes to serve Krishna. This is what's being said in this, because the Gopis of Vrindavan, they had only so-called husbands. It's a ruse to create this sense of tension, but they never actually interact with them. They're like shadows to create this kind of tension within Vrindavan. But take it back to the verse, and he's saying, oh, the best, they leave everyone. And this is what the verse is saying. The Gopis of Vrindavan have given up the association with their husbands, sons, and other family members who are very difficult to give up, and they have forsaken the path of chastity. But then they're glorified. Aradya Bhagavan Vrajesha Tanayasta Dhamma Vrindavan Ramya Kachirupasana Braja Vidu Vargena Valkalpita Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's a sannyasi, and he comes and says, who's the best of all living entities? What to speak of those who epitomize the pinnacle of bhakti? The Gopis of Vrindavan. What did they do? According to Uddhava, he said, oh, they just left everybody and they went with Krishna. So that's real chastity. Because ultimately, and that's not an invitation for everyone to become promiscuous, obviously. It has to be understood in the context. The point is that Krishna is the husband of everybody. All living entities are female. We're all subordinate to Krishna eternally. And those who have come to this intense love for Krishna, the Gopis of Vrindavan, as Uddhava is revealing after seeing them, their love is the thickest of all of them. From a worldly point of view, even when the British came to India, they said, what is all this? What kind of religion do you have? Your God is lecherous. He's there off in the forest with other men's wives and so forth. There's a complete misunderstanding of everything. In fact, they thought that not only were people of India heathens because they didn't accept Christianity, but also they thought primitive culture. Then one scholar from India, from England was here, and he began to study the Sanskrit language, and he made an announcement that changed the Western world forever. He said, this Sanskrit language, it's more advanced than Latin or Greek. Sure, Greek's pretty close to Sanskrit as far as the rules and regular, but Sanskrit's head and shoulders above these languages that we've accepted as the mainstay of education in the West. As if you know Latin, you know Greek, then you can understand all the literatures. And what's more, wait till you see the Srimad Bhagvatam. There's nothing like it in the world. The nuance, the poetical nuance, the philosophy, and the imagery there is unmatched, and so forth. Heard around the world. That's when Indology started. People said, well, what's really going on in India? We want to study it, and so forth. So this is the culture of the highest understanding of what real life is, a view into the spiritual world. And we say there's some geographical location. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted the Goswāmīs to come back here. He asked them, these most intelligent people on the planet at the time, who he gathered together, and he sent them here, and he said, reveal Vrindavan to the world. Let everyone come here. And just like Uddhava, when people come here, I was here in 2001, right after remember what happened? Was it 2001? It was 1999? Oh, 9/11, yeah. 2021 was 9/11. Sorry. 2020? 2001, there was 9/11. And you might imagine that the flights were cheap. Nirkula got me a flight over here, and there's nobody else on it except for me. I was like, woohoo! Huh? It was already booked. It was Purushottam Mas in 2021. And, 2001. Don't let me do your taxes. And I came over here, and boy, I interrupted my own thought process because I was going to tell you something. Why did I want to tell him that? ₹20 for anybody can get me back on what my track was. I was bringing it up in the first place. Sorry. Yeah? What did she say? I can't hear.
Mahaprabhu asked Sanatana Goswami to reveal Vrindavan.
Yeah, I'm still a little off track. But anyway, we came here. Oh, thank you. And I saw these, Purushottam Mas was outrageously crowded. I'd never seen, of course nowadays Vrindavan's crowded all the time, but in Purushottam Mas, I mean, Indians know which side of their bread it's buttered on. And so when they hear there's some extra benefit, like Kumbh Mela, everybody goes. And in Vrindavan during Purushottam Mas, everybody comes. And we were at that time doing Govardhan Parikram every day. And I was with a friend, Madhav Maharaj, and we were trying to figure out a time a day that wouldn't be so crowded that you'd be stepping on people going around the hill. So one day we stayed at Radhakund, and we stayed up in shifts. We woke up like every hour to look out the window to see if it had died down, and it didn't. In any case, the one day there was this huge crowds coming out of Radhakund, and there were these two tall blonde guys with backpacks on. I had seen them in Vrindavan weeks before. And they said, what is this place? I said, it's called Vrindavan. It's the most spiritual place in the world. They said, oh, okay. They were Swedes, and they were just on a trek of the world. They happened to wander into Vrindavan. And I showed them where they could stay. And then weeks later, I didn't hear a word from them. I saw them walking out of Radhakund together. They'd gone all around the hill. I said, hey! And then we started talking. And I said, what'd you do? And they said, we walked around. Whatever this is, we walked around it. We just kept following all the people, and we walked around it. And they had come here on a very auspicious time and had walked around Govardhan Hill and so forth. It reminded me how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna wanted to reveal Vrindavan. He did it through Uddhava. When Krishna left the planet, he told Uddhava to go to Badarikashram and talk to all the sages there and tell them about his departure and also inform them about the topmost process of bhakti yoga. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revealed it to the world. He said, let everybody know that this is the place. And then Prabhupada, nobody did more than Prabhupada, because when we first came to Vrindavan, at least when I first came here, 1975 was the first time, and the Krishna Balaram Mandir had just been built, and the opening was that year. And it was, you couldn't get a rickshaw because it was so far out in the country, away from the city. Nobody wanted to, there was only bicycle rickshaws at that time. Nobody wanted to take you because it was so far off the beaten path. And there was nobody there. It was very quiet. To get into town, you had to take a little horse cart. There were no cars in the old days. And now look at it. Prabhupada announced it to the world, and he put out the Krishna book so everyone would hear about these pastimes and then come here and feel it for themselves, and that's why we're here. Om Tat Sat. Now let's see if you have any reflections or questions. Pavani Bhakti needs a mic.
Thank you, Gurudev. You mentioned that we are followers of Rupa Manjari, and they are little girls, younger than the Gopis, and they have a more submission. They are the heart cells, and they are without independence, without more sense of independence for themselves, but it's mostly for Radha and Krishna, and that's the mood we have to follow.
All for Srimati Radharani.
Also for Srimati Radhika. But we are also following the Gopis, and you did somewhat mention that they have somewhat independence as well. So who are we following?
Yeah, first of all, we can't prematurely imitate any great devotee. In fact, let's speak of Dhruva Maharaj, who went to the forest and didn't eat for a long time. Prabhupada warns us there and elsewhere that we shouldn't try to imitate great devotees, but we should try to follow in their footsteps. And the ways that we do that are to sincerely follow the process as it's been bequeathed to us, as it's been passed down. Tvat pada potena mahat kritena. When we get instruction from the Mahat, from Krishna, or through the disciplic succession, and we follow it very carefully according to our capabilities, then we're rightly situated. And what it means to follow in the footsteps also is to adopt the mood of selfless service. The more we have association with those who are serving, service for service, and the more we offer that ourselves, sublimating our own sense of ego for it, for what we're doing, the more we'll feel satisfied. And that's also what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommended very openly to everyone. Trinada pisuni chena todor api suhishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. In fact, Kaviraj Goswami says, take this and hang it around your neck as a necklace, which means always be extremely humble and give respect to others, but don't expect any respect in return. And when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was queried about various ways in which to understand one's eternal identity, because there are people who offer a shortcut and say, if you just come to my ashram, I will give you your spiritual identity in the spiritual world and a kind of meditation for that, and then Sanjay is your uncle. And there's a way in which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when asked about that, said, you know, our Siddha Pranali, our mantra is Trinadapi Sunichena. Enter very humbly, and the holy name will deliver you. So we should take the principle of selfless service and apply it. It's funny, I just remembered when I took this course from Anuttama Prabhu called Leadership and Management. During it, we had breakout sessions. It was a 4-day course. It's like getting an MBA in 4 days. And during one of the exchanges, he was asking a question about how you could reward devotees for different kinds of service, and somebody raised their hand and said, more service? And without hesitating, he said, yeah, if they're gopis, and then he went on to somebody else's raised hand. I just remembered his kind of nonchalant way of answering. He said, how do you reward devotees for their hard service? And he said, by more service? And he said, yeah, if you're gopis. And then he called somebody else. And so it is that, though. We want to have that sense of selfless service. Savai pum samparo dharmo, yato bhakti radhoksaje, ahaitu pratiyata, yayatma suprasidati. This is the mission statement, or the statement of purpose, or the extraction that these sages at Naimisharanya give when they're asked all these questions. What's the purpose of life? Sutta answers it early. He says, for all beings, the main thing is unmotivated, uninterrupted service. That's what real manjari bhav is, unmotivated and uninterrupted. In fact, there was a time at which, when devotees were going out, I mean, think about the devotees who served Srila Prabhupada in the early days, Brahmananda and Gargamuni brothers. Prabhupada was at a program and somebody was challenging him and said, oh yeah, well, you're just preaching to all these people who accept Krishna consciousness very easily. Why don't you go to the Muslim countries and preach to them, see what happens there? And Prabhupada, in a warrior's mood, said, we will go. And then the next day he told Gargamuni and Brahmananda to go to, what was it, Pakistan? What? Yeah, Pakistan. So whatever they were doing, it didn't matter. I mean, you know, somebody's on a sewing machine, somebody else is drinking a glass of water. You know, you find a half a glass of water and the sewing machine's still going. They were gone. As soon as they heard Prabhupada say, go to Pakistan, they just got a ticket and left. And before Prabhupada could recall them, because he said, maybe it's not a good idea, and there were actually reports that started coming in that some Americans had been killed there. And they really did get harassed and beat up there. But I'm talking about their mood. Prabhupada said it, and they immediately left and hitchhiked and caught whatever they could to go there. So these are indications of, I'm not saying you have to head out for Pakistan right now and stand in the street with a big sign. But the point is, find that. That's where the nectar is. Wherever one can say, I'm going to dedicate my life selflessly in this way, that's the principle. So we just have a few minutes left, so we'll have a kirtan. And I was thinking about, I don't know, you know, Hamsa Dwani is nice. It's an evening tune, but we don't have to tell anybody that, right? We're going to sing a raga that's very sweet. My apologies for those who study science of raga, because it's kind of an evening tune. But it's too nice to pass up being in this place. More than, you know, philosophy It's the feel of these places, as Madhavan had said when we were just down in Jagannath Puri. In Hiroshima, you can still detect radiation from the atomic blasts. And here, there's spiritual radiation. And we take that by raga and singing the holy names from our heart. So let's try. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Play cartels. Good. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bum, bum, bum. You full. Yeah. Yeah, full. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Śrīla Rūpa Gosvāmī ki jai, Shri Chitra Saki ki jai, Shri Vrindavan ki jai. Dai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo.